Good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you all. I'll start us with prayer and then introduce our speaker. God be with you. Let us pray. God of all creation, you breathed life into the world and give us life abundant. Offer us the wisdom to care for your creation, to see you in the world that surrounds us, and to be people who help protect these beautiful resources you have given us. We give thanks for this day, for the beauty of spring, for the flowers, rain that this season brings. May we see you in each of those beautiful marks of the season. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Imagine my delight when the Environment Committee goes about finding a speaker for today, and then in connecting me with our speaker, Kaeley and I realize, look at that. I get to have a friend here at church. I am lucky enough to call Kaeley a friend. Rev.Kaeley McEvoy is also a United Church of Christ pastor and serves as the director of the Fellowship Program for Sojourners. And we are privileged to have her here this morning to talk about how we can go beyond Earth Day. How do we care for creation in the fullness of our lives? So I'm excited to see what Kaeley has for us and to get to work together in a professional capacity as well as welcome a friend here among us. Let's give Kaeley a hand. Also going to let Karen say a few words about Environment Committee.
Thank you, Adeline. Yes, very much looking forward to Kaeley's talk today about eco-theology, and very grateful for Reed's work to help connect us with Kaeley and Adeline's friendship with Kaeley. And of course, this is in celebration of Earth Day, which is tomorrow. So the Environment Committee does various things at St. Columba's, if you aren't aware, including educational forums like this. We also have another event planned for today, a water and wilderness service today at 5 p.m. at Fletcher's Cove, and I'm going to pass around some flyers about those with Reverend Peter Nunnally. So if you're interested in taking the words that we hear from Kaeley today and putting them into practice at 5 p.m., this is your big chance. So without further ado, Kaeley, looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Karen. I think, Karen, I'm going to get his. Can you all hear me with this?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, hello, friends. My name is Rev.Kaeley McEvoy, and it's an honor to be here today. Just walking around this morning, I think I was greeted like 5 or 6 different times by people. This is such a friendly and wonderful congregation. So we are here this morning to talk beyond Earth Day. It's not just one day a year when we live on the earth and celebrate the earth. And one of my goals for today is to allow you to walk away with some practices as well that maybe you can try out this afternoon at 5 o'clock at Fletcher's Cove. But you can also take with you into your spiritual life as you think about ways that eco-theology can really change your faith. So today, I would love to just have this be a conversation as much as possible. So I'll have some moments of question and answer. I'm going to share a little bit about my favorite eco-theologian, Sally McFay, and we're going to engage in some spiritual practice together. So please take what you want. If you are here and thinking this lady is just talking, just listen. Don't worry about it. We're here to just really honor the earth together and see what comes out of it. So a little bit about myself. I am a gardener. I live in Mount Pleasant. I formerly served at Westmoreland Congregational Church, which is not too far from here. I'm a UCC minister, and I am the granddaughter of a man that really loved tomatoes. So growing up, my childhood hands were not usually carrying worms, but were carrying tomatoes through my grandfather's garden. And I did not really know that this was so much a part of the way that I viewed God until I went to seminary in New York City, where, spoiler alert, not a lot of tomatoes. I went to Union Theological Seminary in New York and started there a urban garden on the rooftop of our seminary with a great cohort of folks. And there really began to dive into eco-theology, which is ecology and theology. So that's a little bit about me and my story. And one thing I like to ask people when we engage in conversations about the earth is, what is your favorite thing in nature? One of the most important aspects of eco-theology is paying attention. And the more micro we can get with our attention, the more macro God becomes, and the more obvious it becomes. So, Karen, I wonder if we could a little earlier use the handheld mic, if you don't mind, DJing that around. But if I could maybe just have 2 or 3 folks share their name and their favorite thing in nature, I would be grateful to hear who is in the crowd today.
Hi, I'm Karen Hammonds. I'm on the Environment Committee with Karen.
Great.
I like surprises in nature. This week, when I was outside, I saw a bird taking a dirt bath. I imagine you have seen that as well, and it's just so much fun to watch them. And then I turned around, and behind me was a squirrel gathering, I thought, nuts, but no, the squirrel was gathering grass. And its mouth was full of grass, and a few minutes later, I kept watching and watching, kept getting fuller and fuller, and it ran up the tree, and I watched till it went to the very, 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 very top. You know, the squirrel's nests are at the very top. So it was at the very top, and there it was. It popped into the nest, and I expect there are babies, right? This time of year? So
Maybe.
I like surprises.
Surprises. I love that.
Anyone else?
I'm Thelma, and my favorite thing is running water, especially a small stream in the forest that's sort of, rippling over the rocks. And my husband and I saw, several of those, but one in particular in the High Sierra at Emerald Lake, and this little stream running down and into the lake was just so beautiful.
Yeah. Running water.
My name's Bob. I like clouds, and I specifically like clouds because they define the margins of our atmosphere, and it's easy to forget our atmosphere because we can't see it, we can't taste it, we can't smell it. But if you watch clouds, they define the margins, and we all depend upon that very fragile atmosphere for life on Earth.
Yeah. Oh, thank you all so much. Every time I ask that question, I have something new to look at now in nature. So, clouds, running water, surprises, squirrels, all aspects of the divine. Another question that I like to center in conversation about eco-theology, because it's specific in every different part of the world, is not just who are we, but where are we? We are on traditional Piscataway land. We're in the mid-Atlantic ecosystem. We're in the Chesapeake watershed. I know some of you also do smaller watershed work here. But when we're thinking about where we are in the world, there's a practice that I like to do, which is called pulling away the layers. And this is going to be our first embodied practice together. So again, I invite you to, if this is something uncomfortable, just kind of dive in, give it a try. So what we're going to do is think about this space throughout the centuries, this land as close to the original land as we can get it. So if you're willing, I invite you to close your eyes now and take a deep breath with me. Take a deeper breath if your coffee is running throughout you. And first think about this building emptying, this building falling away. Watch the windows and their beautiful colors sort of melt to the ground, and you're just outside in Tenleytown. Tenleytown is here, and now the streets become unpaved. There's just grass. The rest of the houses and the buildings fall away. And there is just rolling hills. We think of the first people that tended the land. Can you smell what they smell? Can you hear their laughter? Can you see the same clouds that they saw? As you're holding on to this vision, just take one more deep breath and send gratitude to those people and to all the people that have walked on this land before us and that will walk on this land after us. And I'll invite you just to wiggle your toes a little, your fingers, open your eyes, come back to the room. And now you're all embodied eco-theologians. You did it. Congrats. I like to do that to kind of take us out of our mind and into our bodies, because this eco-theology work is embodied. Our earth is embodied. We can feel that running water through our hands. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach eco-theology. There's a whole section of indigenous beliefs that we're not going to touch on too much today, but I'm happy to come back and give that lecture as well. There's a whole lot we can say about food justice, land justice, environmental justice. Another talk that I would love to give. But today, I really want to stick with Christian theology, because that is where we are, in a church, in a nave. So I would like to talk about our metaphors for God today, how we think of God and our earth together. So our current metaphors for God that we use are plenty. We can think about many, and I was going to do a question and answer here, but we're gonna keep rolling. so we can save some time for questions after. And I'm going to share one of the current metaphors that we see most often for God is a monarchy model. So that is where we have God as a king or a queen or a lord above the earth, and we have the earth down here. This is a dualistic model that separates us from the earth and from God. There is a theologian named Sally McFay who taught at Vanderbilt Divinity School. She actually passed away in 2019. A majority of her works were written in the 80s and 90s. But what Sally did was open up a Christian imagination about what God could be on earth. In the monarchy model, we see that God is not of the world, and the world is godless. The world is empty of God's presence. It's too lowly to be a royal thing when God is up here. So this model can be harmful when we think about our own beings on earth. It creates this division between people and God. So the alternative model that Sally presents is that the earth is God's body. Whoa. The earth is God's body. So this means we don't have to go somewhere special, like church, or somewhere else, like another world, to experience God. But we can experience God in all places, at all times. All parts of the earth become parts of God. The rivers become God's tears, the fields God's arms to lay in. This metaphor changes our point of view to see that we can be in constant connection with God. I think of communion as one of the ways that we ritualize this practice. We literally say each week, "This is my body. This is God's body." And from the wheat and from the grapes, we take these things and we practice for a little moment a different model of being. We practice that union of earth and of God. There are some implications when we believe in this model. The first is that God's body becomes our own bodies. So we think about our bodies coming from the earth. In Genesis, Adam, or clay, is what we are made of. And this means that the way that we treat bodies that live on the earth represent how we treat God. When bodies are treated differently and harmfully, that is actually against the sacred. A second way that this implication changes the way that we walk in the world is when we think about climate change and environmental justice. We think about God's body being sick. That just sounds a little different than the temperatures are rising. Both are true. We know that. But from a Christian perspective, when we think about our own bodies being sick and how we need to care for each other, that means when God's body is sick, we need to care for that body. The last implication that this metaphor brings to our faith is that God's body can be felt. And this is a reminder that we can interact with the divine through nature. Some of you are going to interact this afternoon at Fletcher's Cove with God, and we're going to try right now to also have an embodied practice of interacting with nature. And I know you're like, we're inside. How do we do that? But there are pieces of wood here that you are sitting on. There are beautiful flowers in the back, and here we are with our bodies that are also a part of nature and made of clay. So this practice is called prayer with 5 senses. And it is, you're already warmed up with a little bit of your meditative state from the first practice. So we're going to try this together now, and I want you all to think of this as something that can be in your toolkit now for prayer. This is where we really are able to feel God's body through our own agency and our own creativity, and that omnipresence of God that is always around us. So I'll invite you to get a little more comfortable this time in your seats. And we'll together take a deeper breath than you took before. And I'd like you to think of your taste. What are you tasting right now that is reflective of God? Maybe there's some lingering coffee, and you can thank the coffee farmers. You can think of the beans from the earth, the plants. Send gratitude to the earth. Take an inhale again and think of what you are touching. If your feet are on the ground, you think of the stone. Your back against the wood that came from trees. What are you touching that is reflective of God? Take an inhale and send gratitude to the earth. Next, smell. What are you smelling that is reflective of God? Maybe a laundered shirt that went through water. Maybe the paper of the hymnal. Send gratitude to the earth for your smell. What can you hear that is reflective of God? The noise outside of the body of Christ moving. Can you be quiet enough to hear the wind and think of God's breath? Send gratitude to the earth for what you can hear. Lastly, open your eyes and see what you can see in a new way that is reflective of God. Is it the fire of the candle? The light of the light bulb that will remind you not to waste it next time? The sun through the windows? Take a deep breath and send gratitude to the earth. And I'll invite you to shake out that exercise in your bodies. Thank you for experimenting in that way. Know that that is a practice that you can do every morning while you're sipping on coffee, if you're taking a walk outside, 5 minutes in between work from home times. You have the invitation to connect with God's body at any time. We can't save something until we love it. We have to see our faith as a vehicle to propel us into loving relationship with the earth. When the earth becomes God's body, we become God's body as well. So I hope that this little dive into eco-theology was helpful this morning. There are a lot of suggested readings that I could have put on here for next steps. But one group that I work with that is local in the DMV area is the Center for Spirituality in Nature. They have groups called SINGs, Spirituality in Nature groups, that are small groups of people that meet outdoors. Both of the practices that we did this morning are from the Spirituality in Nature guide, Inside Out. Beth Norcross is the executive director of this organization, and she is one of my spiritual mentors, and happy to connect this community with the singing community, and I think you're going to do some of that this afternoon too, so that's wonderful. These are also some of Sally McFabe's books that I would recommend, and one Indigenous author that I really love is Vine Deloria. God is Red is a book by them. And out of Wake Forest Divinity School, Melanie Harris is an eco-womanist theologian. So she gives a really incredible perspective from African-American women and their particular way of earth-honoring faiths. So that is what I have for you all today. I would love to have some ample time for question and answer. Thank you very much.
People want to think about their questions and just come on up to the mic. It's on now.
Thank you. I'm Chris Moore, and I'm wondering what suggestions you would have for children and youth.
Be outside for children and youth. I also think I peeked into your We Worship this morning. What an incredible kind of hands-on way to lift up children in a congregation. I think that in working with children and youth, I was also a former youth minister, and you will be surprised sometimes how the mindfulness and the attention can actually happen with them. So I wouldn't lead a class of 5-year-olds through 2 embodied practices so quickly, but I would do one, and I would introduce kind of quiet attention, because children can see so much closer sometimes, you know, like if we ask that favorite thing in nature question, it would be ba 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 ba. But it would probably be, what's your favorite thing, you know, outside. So I think my biggest thought about children and youth is just to not underestimate their wisdom and their knowing and ability to learn.
I'm still Bob.
Still Bob.
I'd like to suggest for all of us, especially for you, that there's a photo. It's called Earthrise. Mm-hmm. It was taken from Apollo 8 on Christmas Eve, 1968, in orbit around the moon. And it's a picture of Earth, a portrait of Earth. Mm-hmm. And I find it very helpful to direct students and myself to a perspective of this tiny little piece of the universe that we're on, and how valuable it is, and thinking about how we can preserve it. So I would recommend it to everybody. Google it, look it up. It's really impressive.
Great. Earthrise.
I don't have a question so much as more a comment and reflection. We had a film showing. Was that last week? Anyway, there's been a lot going on. I've lost track of time. It was very recently called Biggest Little Farm.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not a religious film, but your call basically for us to practice eco-theology through very mindful observations of the minute. I felt like that film really was about that, through the videography and filming, and really the images zooming in to the insects in the dung, and it really just at a micro level in a beautiful way. And so I really just wanted to say I really appreciate how you brought that here, kind of that practice here, even within a building in a church, that we can pause and do those micro observations anywhere.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, that's a great movie. Just beautifully done.
Hi, Kaylee.
Hi, friend.
Bob Musil. I'm thinking about gender, and how I didn't jump up with my favorite things in nature because they're wildflowers, and that's pretty wimpy for a grown man to be talking about those flowers, and how the ephemerals come up and the bloodroot peeks through the ground and reaches toward God. And you talked about how children are just very close to this and they'll chatter about it. But at some point, we get to the point that Ferdinand the bull is the exception. He's a rugged bull and likes flowers. And it seems to me, how do you talk about and include gender so that men who have their own particular little ecosystem and world to deal with don't always end up as wildflower lovers, but as something else? But I just wanted you to reflect a little bit about how we might either reach or prevent little boys who love flowers from becoming guys who like to kill people.
I think any gender can love wildflowers first. let's get that off the table. But I do think it comes down to connection and the ways that our different gender patterns can lead us towards different kinds of isolation. And this, comes back to how we connect with the earth as a practice. When we are only showing ways of connection that are violent, that's the only way we're going to know how to connect. So I think really for any gender, as early as possible, introducing ways of connection that are breaking that binary of how we think we should interact with the earth. I mean, I think gardening is pretty net neutral gender-wise. We both, and you know, any person can get their hands in the dirt. So I'm not saying that that's the full answer, but I think it just comes down to introducing as many ways of connection as possible to all genders. But I would love to think more about that, Bob. Thanks for a good question.
Hi, Kaeley. As you remember, we come in pairs. I love that you gave us resources that took us into racial groups and deep cultural ways of seeing the world. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you saw as new windows to understanding God that came through Deloria or through Harris. Was that her last name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Harris.
I'm confusing her with Columba, but thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think both in Deloria and Harris, you see a lot more emphasis on ecological storytelling, and particularly through different creation narratives that you're going to see come out of indigenous perspectives and African American perspectives. I think the stories that predominantly white theologies tell about the earth are always kind of in that monarchy model where, you know, there was a break with Adam and Eve, versus in Vine Deloria, you're going to see people came from the back of a turtle through mud, and there's that immediate connection. And in Harris, you're going to see first the complicated relationship with predominantly Black people and land through slavery. So there is both a complication with the land, but then there is also kind of a deep knowing that comes through storytelling at the basis. So I think that that's one thing that I would like to integrate into my own practice from both of those authors, is thinking about what are the stories that we tell about the earth in predominantly white settings. And I think that's you all are telling a new story by looking at Little Big Farm and starting to tell stories to your friends that, oh, I went to Fletcher's Cove and saw the river in a new way. You know, those little ways of storytelling, I think, are powerful lessons that I've inherited from those authors.
Hi, Kaeley. My name is Susan.
Hi, Susan.
There's a really nice resonance between what you're offering now and Lily's sermon, which some of us have just heard and some of us are just about to hear. Because in talking about what we can do to help ourselves still feel connected with God, even when we might be going through some of the worst stuff that life can throw at us, he gives us 3 easy steps and urges us all to do all 3 of them this coming week. And the second step is going outside, at least for 20 minutes, go into nature and pay attention.
Oh.
So it really just connects with what you're saying.
Yeah, that $5 I sent him really worked out. That's great.
Thanks, Kaeley. Thanks for the embodied practices that we could all do together. As we were engaging the 5 senses and paying attention, took my shoes off so that I could feel the stone under my feet. People here know that I love shoes, but when I'm not wearing cute shoes, I really love being barefoot because it's a way that I feel like I'm more grounded and more connected with the earth below me, the earth around me. So I'm curious about ways that these forms of prayer, these kinds of meditations inspire the way that you live your daily life, those sort of the ways that you live that allow you to be more connected with creation.
That's a great question. I think one of the biggest practices that does help me connect to creation is always prayer before mealtime. It's simple, but it does make me go back through where my food is coming from and is automatically connected to my own body and thus God's body. It's a little bit of, it's a little bit of a cliche. I mean, it's kind of something that we can learn when we're young, but it wasn't a practice in my life growing up until I lived in an intentional Christian community with 10 other folks, and that was something that we did every night before eating. So that is definitely something that I would encourage, even if it is like I'm having a sip of coffee and I am just saying thank you really quick. I know our lives are busy, and you don't have to do a full Compline every night before dinner, but if you do, more power to you. I love that. But I think that is one easy way, and really just being outside for even 10 minutes a day can be a difference. We see that like scientifically for our immune system and sort of body regulation. So I do try to take a walk every morning. So those are two ways. Yeah.
Well, thank you for this. I'm Reed.
Hi, Reed. Great to meet you.
Thank you for this reflection on being in and surrounded by God. And I think back on a talk like this talk that we had here 10 years ago, perhaps, a Catholic sister, and she reflected on the origin of the universe and that every molecule that ever existed then, and they're in us, and they're around us, and they are God. And whether we think of it as a body or as God within us or God without us, I think that being in nature is a way to be embraced by God. And so the reason we get that 10-minute refreshment, it might be physiological, but it could also be theological.
Yeah.
And so I think that embracing the idea that we can connect with God directly through God's body or through nature is a refreshing thought in itself.
Yeah, thank you, Reed. It could be physiological, but maybe it's theological, for sure.
Any last questions? One more. You get the last one, Karen Gibbons, because then we need to clear out.
Real quickly. As you know, I like surprises. I'm Karen. I was flipping through PBS trying to find something to watch, landed on A Brief History of the Future, which is anti-dystopian. So looking at the future of the Earth plane. And I recommended, there's an article in Forbes online about it, so you could read more. And we all love story, and they're telling this, the program emphasizes the importance of story. So we think back to the Bible, and we think the stories in the Bible and how important they are to helping us understand our relationship to God as one way. And of course, being part of this today is another way. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll check it out.
Well, thank you, Kaeley, very much for coming today and for everybody's great questions. Hope to see you at 5 tonight at Fletcher's Cove and try out these practices that Kaeley's taught us.
Thank you so much, everyone.